Hey, Daniel here from GrowingMusicStudio.com, and in this video I want to show you why local music studios or music schools have difficulty being found. Why they're literally invisible to most of the people in the area. And I'm not talking studios that are brand new. I'm talking studios that have been around 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They have been in business. They might be a multi-instrument studio or school, and yet most people don't even know they exist. So I want to explain how this can be, and I want to explain how to fix it in this video. So this is going to be very to the point, and I'll tell you, my personality is such that I tend to think in systems. I tend to think in a logical manner, sometimes to a fault. And so I want to draw a very clear distinction right here from the beginning, and that is this, that my intention is for any studio to go from A to B in as short a distance as possible. I'm going to get to that in just a second. Now I want to tell you why I'm making this video now. If you look back over the years, I started making videos for Growing Music Studio back in 2016. At the beginning, I didn't have a lot of videos. I didn't create a lot. I wrote mostly in blog posts. And this is largely because I didn't really feel comfortable in the video format. In 2018 and then into the beginning of 2019, I made a ton of videos. And the reason for this was that I had a lot to say, and I had a lot that I wanted to teach people. And what I felt was that during that 15 to 18 month period that I said a lot of things, and I got most of what I believed to be true about studio marketing out into the world. But something new has happened. And I'm not talking about the current global situation we're in, though I will address that later in this video. In September of last year, I started doing something new that I'd never done before. Not in 4 years of consulting music studios on their marketing, on their growth, on group lessons, on differentiating their product, on retention, all these things. I started doing something very, very different. And it was this. I took my own advice in a way that I never had before. I'm a big proponent, and if you've been around Growing Music Studio for very long, you know that I'm a huge proponent of figuring out what your customers want and then selling that to them. Figure out what your customers' desires are, what their motivation is for taking lessons, and use that to influence your messaging and use that to influence the product you're creating, which might mean changing things that you do within your studio. One thing I've always taught as well is that not only should you survey your customers, you should actually speak to them directly and dig deeper. And what I will tell you is that I took my own medicine, I took my own advice, and over the last 5 months, I've spoken to over 75 studio owners in conversations ranging from 1 to 2 hours, and it has fundamentally changed the way that I think about studio marketing. It has clarified for me the exact problems that studio owners have. And the culmination of all that is this video right here. And I say that with no sense of drama. This video comes from a place of, I am still actually apprehending these concepts myself. So though I've helped 300 plus studios with their marketing, what I've learned over the last 6 months has helped me clarify and help studio owners get to the results they want even faster, because I realized something was true that I kind of generally knew was true before, but it's now crystal clear. It is 3D for me. So we're going to talk about why they're invisible, why studios are invisible. We're going to talk about how to fix the problem. And we're going to do this in a very logical, systems-based, scientific, mathematical manner. And to start out with, I'm hoping this is work. I've never done this before. See, there's always a first for everything, as we've all learned in the last month. But I have a visual aid today. I hope you can see this clearly. There's 2 ways that studio owners go about promoting their studio. There's 2 ways that studio owners go about making sure that their studio can be found and is seen, okay? And what I discovered in all these interviews that I had with studio owners is that studio owners have a similar set of problems, and that there are very specific solutions that will solve those problems for 99% of studios. So, to begin with, I want to talk about the self-reported #1 problem that every one of those studio owners had when it came to growth. And it basically boils down to a variation on this statement. I don't know what to do. I need a checklist. I tried this and this and this, and it didn't work. Okay? So there are two pathways I was just mentioning. There are two pathways that studio owners can travel. There's two pathways that studio owners can travel when they're trying to get more students, when they're trying to help or make their studio grow. And one is to give a very direct path to a customer to the goal. So if this is the customer finding the studio, they give them a very direct path to signing up for that studio. Perhaps I could have done something better than A and B, but like I said, I'm very mathematical, I'm very logical. I could have been way more creative. I might have done little cute drawings, but it's just not me. Here's the other way, and the way that most studio owners do it. They have A, and the pathway looks like this. Well, I'm gonna post some business cards around town on bulletin boards. And maybe this month I'll try, I heard someone saying in the Facebook groups that they do Google ads, so I'm gonna start an AdWords Express account and try that. That didn't work. Oh, let's try Facebook ads. Maybe I need to get on TikTok and Instagram and all these social media channels and start posting, videos and pictures of all my students, which, let's be honest, I've actually recommended that in the past. Nothing wrong with it, but we'll get there. Maybe what I need to do is some of this new stuff. Seems like Gary Vaynerchuk is talking tons about starting a podcast for your business. Maybe I should do that. And on we go. And the way that a studio owner sets up their marketing is very haphazard. If they do it at all, is very haphazard. And one would think that in doing all this stuff that maybe accidentally a potential customer would find the studio. But it never works out that way. And I've got 75 recordings to prove it. Because these people are very frustrated that I've talked to. A few of them are on this call right now. And have actually been working with me since we had that call, together. So these are the two options, okay? Now, I told you I wanted to be specific. So I'm gonna get even more specific than this because cute drawings are great, but I wanna tell you the difference between these two things. If you're trying to get new students, doesn't it make sense to be as visible as possible? And shouldn't you accidentally attract some students if you do this? Don't your odds of success go up if you're doing all these different things? And actually, no, here's why. It's not enough for people to know you exist. It's not. There's something else that has to happen. And this is where I want to tread some ground that I tread about 2 years ago briefly, but I think is well worth bringing up again because of this discussion here and then the eventual solution, which I'm going to talk about at the end of this video. And it's simply this. There are two styles of marketing. You could say that there are four epochs in music history: Baroque, Classical, Romance, late Romantic, you have the Impressionists, but then roughly modern. So most music schools teach those four areas. This is the level that I'm talking at. When we're talking about marketing, I'm not talking Facebook versus Google. I'm saying in general, there are two huge, big, broad categories of marketing. One is called branding and one is called direct response. And some folks in the past have thought that I really slam branding. I speak bluntly sometimes. It might come across that way. I do have a very black and white way of talking. It's a weakness and it's a strength at the same time. What I will largely say is that the influences that I've had in my own upbringing, so to speak, in marketing is that branding is not something you really need to do as a small business. And I'm going to qualify this in just a second because there's people on this call right now I know who are big believers in branding. And I love those people. But I'm going to qualify in just a second. A marketer that greatly influenced me about 10 years ago is this guy named Pagan. If you like marketing pages on Facebook, you might even see his ads every once in a while because he's still in business, though he isn't as active as he was before. He's made over $100 million. He's kind of retired in his mid-40s. He said something that I've never been able to forget in a training that I took from him. And he said, a business shouldn't worry about branding until they've made $1 billion. A business shouldn't worry about branding until they made a billion with a B, $1 billion. Now, let me define branding versus the second broad category of marketing, which I'll call direct response. So you have branding and then you have direct response marketing. These are the two huge categories. And what I will say is that branding in general is designed to raise awareness of a business. Now there's sub-definitions of that. There's one that I want to specifically talk about, again, as I mentioned, but there's branding, which is generally designed to raise awareness for a business. And then there's direct marketing, which is designed to actually cause a customer in a very short period of time to go from finding you to paying you. And what I'll say is that if you have branding on one side and you have direct response marketing on the other side, what I really recommend for studios to do is to actually put all of their eggs in one basket and do direct response marketing, to focus on this side over here. I guess I could erase my drawing, but I'm actually going to use it again in a second, so we're going to hold off on that. Now, I do want to say one thing about branding. Is it a waste of time? Is it useless? I wrote an article 18 months ago called Why My Logo is Garbage. And I talked about how I grew my studio to 6 figures with a logo that I made in Microsoft Paint with a piece of free clip art that I got off a CD while I was in college. And that was my branding. There is value in branding in that once someone discovers you, good branding can actually be a credibility marker and can build trust. And I gotta tell you, that's really important. If someone doesn't trust you, I promise you, they're not gonna buy from you, period. So I'm not saying that branding is specifically useless. I'm not gonna say that. What I will say is that the best thing you can do as a studio owner is to create some sort of thing, an ad, a post, put it out into the world, and give very, very clear directions as to what that person's supposed to do with it. That's the first one here. You create an ad, you tell them very specifically what they're supposed to do. There is a well-defined sales process for your studio, and they end up buying. What I will tell you is that the average family that finds my studio goes from finding me to buying within a couple days. Like, I have their credit card information, I charge their card within a couple days. Because I have a very defined process, and all of my marketing is set up not to make them aware of me, not to make them impressed with what my students can do. It's all designed to get them to make a decision. Okay, so when you use direct marketing, you don't waste money. And the money that you spend on, let's say, ads or promotion actually comes back to you faster. So, to briefly review, before we go into why you're invisible, I'll just briefly review again. There's 2 ways you can do marketing. Have someone find you and get to making a purchasing decision from you very quickly, or you can do all of this branding type stuff, endless social media posting, a podcast a podcast or a video series, or posting things all over YouTube, trying a little bit of this and that, and you're just going in a circuitous route all around, okay? That's the 2 things. Now, I'm gonna put this down for just a second. How do you go about doing that? Well, I'm gonna tell you that, but first I actually wanna tell you why you're invisible, the whole purpose of this video, okay? And this is really blunt, and I'm not disguising this fact. I'm not gonna dangle this. I'm gonna be very, very quick with this. There are 3 locations that if you show up in these 3 places, the effect that it will have on your studio is that anywhere from 10x to 20x to even 30x the number of people will find you each month. This is not an exaggeration. I actually emailed an old client of mine last night just to see how she was doing. We haven't worked in a while. She's very successful in a major city, has multiple teachers working for her, and is doing really well under the circumstances. And I just reached out, had no ulterior motive, and I just said, hey, how are you doing? She sent me an email back, and I asked her if I could see her statistics for the month of March. The number of people that discovered her studio in her local area in the month of March was around 450 people. And I have, she showed me her traffic report, she showed me all these things that she was doing. 450 people. And she told me for that time period, she actually wasn't even running ads. On a month where she was running, so she shut them off because of, again, the current situation we're in. When she's in a normal month, she would actually have more people find her, is kind of the what I read between the lines. When I meet with studio owners, like these 75 that I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, when I meet with studio owners, and if they even know how many people have found them for the month, which most don't, but when we get into their data, usually after they've become a client, and I start looking deeply into what's going on inside their business, Most of these studios, if they're a smaller studio, let's say 75 students or less, 50 students or less, most of these studios are being found by about 10 to 20, 30 potential customers a month. That compared to 400. And what I'll tell you, even in my own studio, not even using all the methods I'm about ready to tell you, would often be found by about 200 to 300 per month. Now, I think I don't need to talk about the enormity of that gap. That is literally the difference between your phone ringing off the hook and you having as many students as you want at all times and actually a surplus so that you can be picky or that you can raise your rates, and basically being invisible. So the title of this video was not clickbait, it was not an exaggeration. That is literally the difference. It's summed up right there. And so those 3 locations that I told you earlier, where you have to be if you want to be found, are basically 3 places: Google Ads, Google search results, and Google Maps. And again, what I'll tell you is that when I looked at her traffic report, about 85% of her traffic was coming from those 3 places. This is the formula. All that other stuff that I was kind of poo-pooing a little bit earlier, this stuff here, you don't need it. She's not doing any of that stuff. Or the majority of that stuff. There's a few things I mentioned in there that are actually what I consider to be a really, really good idea, but she didn't need all those things. She just needed to show up in those 3 areas, those 3 places. I will tell you, even for myself, only doing ads, not even pursuing an organic strategy for my own personal private studio, I would typically get in a year, for 5 years running, around between 175 to 225 leads, not visits, not people asking me, but people who actually reached out, contacted me, gave me all their information, and I had a follow-up conversation with them, anywhere from 175 to 225 on a budget of about $2,000. And that has been happening for 5 years and will happen indefinitely because Google's not going away, right? So I'm going to say it again. The 3 locations you have to be if you don't want to be invisible in your local area, and I'm going to talk about online in just a second: Google Ads, Google Search, Google Maps. Now, let's talk about online lessons for a minute. When people search for lessons in your area and you want to teach them online, you still actually need to be in those 3 areas. If you're wanting to go global, and I actually have a lot of clients right now who are starting to advertise nationally. 2 of my clients right now are actually building an app for online lessons. One of them started this as a result of the current situation and is already into the process of building it. One was building an app prior to this and is now really motivated to kind of finish it. If you're doing something like that, yeah, maybe Google Maps isn't the place you'll be found, but if you're competing in the global scale, it's different. What I'm telling you right here is that even for your local area, if you are going to teach online, you still need to be found in that way, and you will get more than enough students from your local area to fill up your roster again in these strange times. And then if, let's say after this, there's a few people who've emailed me who've said, I like this online teaching so much, I think I want to keep doing it. What I'd recommend, advertise in your local area, let people know you're local, it will build trust, but say, hey, these lessons are going to be delivered online. And for people who are looking for that in your local area, you can actually provide them a better experience than people who would find maybe one of these international competitors, but they only have the option to take online. You might have the option to do a local recital with someone who you teach primarily online in your local area. So for most studios, these 3 locations, Google Maps, Google Ads, Google Search, this is all you need to be the most visible studio in your area. And what I will tell you, again, this is not a fancy theory. This is what I have discovered in talking to all these people, and then this is the way that we solve their problem, is to get them to show up in these 3 spots. I often cite my own studio as an example. I did more so at the beginning of Grow because I didn't have 350 something clients at the time. But even with my local studio, there's a certain omnipresence that I enjoy in my area because of that. And it's not because I'm amazing. This is not a brag. There's actually teachers who are way better than me. There's an internationally famous teacher who is presented for MTNA that lives in my city, who is a much better teacher than me. So this is in no way like a reflection. I'm not saying this is like this reflection on my teaching. It's just that I got to the top of these three things, and what I've experienced over the last 8 years is the result. One more piece of data that might be fascinating before we kind of wrap things up here, because I want to revisit this again, and then I want to and then we'll end. But it's this: the average studio, again, talking to these 75 studio owners, having these 1 to 2 hour interviews with them. The average small studio gets about 1 to 3 leads per month, but they'd like to get 5 to 10. They could handle that. And they're hoping and praying because no one can find them. The average large studio, and I'll define that as at least 150 students, they might get anywhere from 5 to 20 leads a month. What they're really looking for is anywhere from 10 to, I have one studio that I'm working with that they want anywhere from 60 to 100 leads per month. They do nearly $2 million a year in revenue, and they have huge aspirations in terms of the growth that they want to experience going forward from here. And we're working on getting them visible in those 3 areas. They obviously already have a lot of strength if they're doing that much revenue, but they want more. Now, how do you fix this? This is where I want to end things. How do you fix this invisibility problem? Okay? I want to revisit the straight line versus the curved line, because we're going to actually reuse this illustration. So originally I said the way that you want to get a client or someone to sign up for your studio is to start at A and get them to B as fast as possible. Don't do all this route. Have a defined process and fix the funnel, so to speak. That's the first time I'm using those words in the video, but that's essentially what it is. But there's a second way that I can apply this, and this is the way that most studio owners go about fixing this problem. And what I will tell you is that most studio owners go about fixing the problem this way, okay? They'll read blogs, they'll join support groups, and they'll try to piece together a strategy. And I gotta tell you, I can't malign someone for that, because this is exactly what I did. From the time that I learned what Google Ads was to me actually getting it to work took 18 months. For the record, I've never had a client take that long. It's just that I didn't have a guide, and I had to kind of piece it together because there was no one out there really talking about how it could be applied to a music studio. Back when I did this nearly a decade ago, the only studios that were doing it were big, giant studios. They're the only ones who even had the know-how or the contacts or had the foresight to do it. Small studios just weren't on that platform at that time. And so this is what I had to do. What most studio owners do now, though, is kind of go through the circuitous route, and they're trying to kind of piece it all together on their own so that they can eventually get to this, where they have clients finding them and signing up within days, and they're getting, instead of 10 to 20 people finding them a month, 300, 400, 500 people a month finding them. This is what they're trying to do, and the way they go about it is this circuitous route. And there's really funny and interesting examples of this. 2 years ago, in one of the Facebook groups, I can't remember which one it was, it might have been Piano Teachers as Business Owners, someone came in, and I knew what he was doing, and he said, hey, I found a way to grow a studio to this many people. I think it was like 1,000 or something. He's like, I personally grow my studio to 1,000. I had no reason to doubt him, but I knew what was going to happen next. Because what he asked at the end of the post was, who wants to know how? Literally within an hour or two, there were 60 or 70 comments that said, I want to, following, the typical stuff. And the other thing he said in the post was, if you do, just DM me, I'll send it to you. So I DM'd the guy. And what's interesting was that when I read the ebook that he was giving, there was 2 things that were true about it. And I don't fault the guy for trying to create some transactions. I mean, let's be honest. That's why I'm on Facebook. That's why all of us are on doing these things. We're trying to find clients either for our studios or for whatever project or business that we're involved in. So I fault him not at all for that. Here's the punchline. Here's the point. Is that the advice he gave in that ebook was exactly what I'm saying right now. And what I had at that time been preaching for 2 to 3 years prior to that. And here's what's so interesting, was that some of those people that said, I want this ebook, I really want to fix the problem in my studio, they wrote that in the comments. No doubt they got the ebook, they read the ebook, and then they did nothing with it. Because some of those very people I saw a year later still complaining that they were struggling in student attraction. And some of those people are some of the loudest voices in the Facebook group that give advice on what you should be doing to grow your studio. I find it very fascinating. Some of these people I've actually had a chat with, and they weren't really interested. They weren't committed. And that's where this comes in, because there's two ways you can go about this. And this is where I'm going to end. You can continue going about trying to piece all this together on your own, or you can go straight to what you want, which is that many students. The goal number that you have for your business, being visible, bringing in a certain number of students, getting to a certain revenue level, however you define your goal, you can either go about it and, post comments saying, hey, I want an ebook that'll solve my problems, then do nothing with it, participate every single day in endlessly distracting things, or you can go straight to what you want. And there's two ways that you can do this, and this is where I'm going to end the video. One of them I do, the other one I don't. There's two ways that you can do this. One, you can hire an agency to build out a complete studio marketing funnel for you. I'm being 100% serious about this because the way that I got my start was actually doing that. At the beginning of Grow, yes, I was teaching people how to do things like I was doing in my own studio, but I also had a team around me that for larger studios, we would actually build out their funnels. So I kind of got experience on both sides. I've seen it from both sides. So you can hire an agency to do that. And, pricing that out, which again, I asked a lot of these studio owners that I had, these 75 studio owners that I talked to over the last 5 months, had these 1 to 2 hour conversations with, asked them, have you ever priced this out? No one has. They don't even know what it would cost to get to their goals. They don't even know what it would cost to get to their goals. So to build out a funnel like this, you're probably looking at spending anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000, depending on the size and scope of the funnel you want to build. But at the very least on the low end, for someone who really knows what they're doing, it would cost you probably at least $5,000 to get one ad network running for you, having them monitoring it, optimizing it, studying your school, understanding your messaging, helping you build your messaging if you're unclear on it, and then building out either a lead optimized website or a lead optimized set of landing pages. Probably going to cost you at least $5,000. And if you're wanting more exposure, it'll cost you more. Is it worth it? 100% it's worth it. If you could go from getting 10 people finding you a month to 300 people finding you a month, and therefore jump in student number by 10, 20, 30 students in a very short period of time, it would be absolutely worth spending that kind of money. I've had clients in the last year go from literally 30 students to 105 in like a 4 to 5 month period once they got all this stuff right. So it's 100% worth it. So that's one way that you could do it. The other way to do it would be a hybrid between DIY, do it yourself, this. It's a hybrid between this way and this way. Because if you can find someone who actually gives you an exact strategy, hitch your wagon to their star because they can take you places. And here's what I mean. I'm not talking about like a business support group where, or maybe like a marketing course. There's a lot of general marketing courses out in the world. And even from people that I respect, even the training that I mentioned earlier, I would say is probably too general for the average studio owner. I was still confused when I took that training. That actually really helped me. Because the truth is, most trainings are just glorified audiobooks, and you just pay more for them. And maybe they have like a Facebook group thrown in or a few Q&A sessions, but at the end of the day, they're a glorified audiobook. What you're really looking for is a hybrid between a training, I want to say this very specifically because I don't want to be unclear, a training and someone giving you an exact replicatable strategy. Not just, hey, here's some great ideas about marketing that you could have found on YouTube or on a blog. It's, here's the actual campaign, but instead of them having a team of people design it for you, they give you a tutorial that shows you how to copy and paste that into, let's say, your Google ads, or to copy and paste it into your Facebook ads. Or they give you, a copy and paste template for exactly what your website should be. Not, hey, here's some ideas, hey, here's some off-the-cuff things that I think. It's templates. Combined with, and this is where that support system comes in, and this is what I didn't have that I wish I had 10 years ago. Someone who can actually look at how you're using the template and say, oh, it's wrong here, 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 and here. So those are your two options to get directly to what you want. So you can do this. I did it. I spent 4 years getting to the place where I didn't feel like my job was at risk. So 4 years from the time I started my studio to the time I felt like there was some stability. And then I spent another 4 years getting to the place where I felt that it was on autopilot. 8 years. You can do it. It's possible. I won't malign anyone who will. If I could go back and be my own coach 15 years ago, this is what I do. And I hope I would have the presence of mind. I would hope that I was investment-minded enough to not be afraid to invest in a better future. Because the other problem, and this is where I'll end, the other problem is that once upon a time, me personally would have been scared to invest in something like that. I would have sat back on the sidelines saying, oh, I really wish I could get 300 people finding my studio every single month after month after month predictably. Oh, I wish I could get 10, 15, 20 leads. But would I have been brave enough to invest in actually having someone build that for me? Or to get those templates and have a coach actually walk me through setting that up and critique it every step of the way so that instead of it taking 8 years, it would only take me 3 to 6 months? I don't know if I would have. But what I do know is that the folks who are investment minded like that now, who take that straight line to get to exactly what they want, those are some of the people that I've described earlier in this very call. Clients of mine who have rapidly increased the size of their studio in a very short period of time. So that is it. To briefly summarize, there are 3 places that you must absolutely be if you intend to be found. If you do not want to be invisible in your local area, you absolutely must be present. Google Ads, Google Maps, Google Search. There are other places, but those 3, like I mentioned, that one client of mine, 400 people finding her studio per month just because she's shown up in those 3 areas. And what I will tell you is that if you want to go in a straight line, you could invest in getting an exact strategy. Those exact campaigns, ads, website layout, text, copy, the messaging, a sales process, all that. That is how you go in a straight line and get people to find you and make a purchasing decision from your studio in a very short period of time. So I hope this is helpful. If you have questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll be checking those all day, the day that this video is made. And then if you're watching this at some point in the future, if you leave a comment, or ask a question, I will actually follow up. I get notifications of people asking questions on videos I made years ago every single week, and I go back and I follow up with them. So if there's something unclear here, you have a question, comment, criticism, let me know. But otherwise, I really appreciate your time and attention. We've spent about 30 minutes here. Really appreciate it. I don't take it lightly that you took time out of your afternoon or morning or evening, wherever you are in the world, to watch this. And drop a like on the video, share it with a friend, and I will see you the next time I do one of these. Bye.